This program is brought to you by pridenz.com.
Hello, how are you today?
I'm great, thank you. All the better for having your presence in my office, Benjamin.
Thank you. So you're Maryan Street?
Maryan Street, Member of Parliament, in my 7th year
in
Parliament.
Year. So is that like second term or?
Third term, yep. We've got 3-year terms, so this is my 3rd term as a Member of Parliament.
Your 3rd term. So where are you from?
Born in New Plymouth originally, but spent most of my adult life in Auckland, 27 years or so in Auckland, and then moved to Wellington because of my job, and now I go between Nelson and Wellington now, so I work out of Nelson mostly.
Where's your MP base?
Nelson is my MP base. This is my Wellington office, obviously, but Nelson is where I'm based as a list MP, and I've been there for the last 5 years. So I've lived there and worked there.
So why did you want to go into politics?
I don't recall a time when I wasn't in politics. Oh, yes, I do. When I was at university, I wasn't very politically attuned. I was very active in all sorts of other things, but not politics. And it was towards the end of the 70s when my political awareness started to sharpen up. So I was early 20s at that point. And then I started to become painfully aware of injustice really around me and inequity, particularly as a woman, but and then increasingly as I understood my own sexuality around gay politics as well.
What was it like when you found out that you were becoming an MP?
It was something that wasn't a surprise to me. I'd been very involved in politics for a long time by then. I'd been the president of the Labour Party in the 1990s, and I'd stood down from that because my partner and I at the time had a daughter who was just about to start school, and I wanted to be out of the public eye before she started school. So I waited 10 years until my daughter was old enough to contribute to the decision, and came into Parliament when she was 15. So she's all grown up, but she has grown up with politics as well.
Is she going to be in politics when she's older? Well,
she's just finished her degree in majoring in political studies, so something's rubbed off, but I don't know that she'll want to be an MP, but she's very interested in policy work.
How has being an MP changed you?
You have to get used to the public intrusion on your life, so there isn't much that's private. I try never to do interviews in my home in order to protect that area so that people can't comment on the kind of house I have, and it's just a level of self-protection that's important. And I think because I'm usually a very sociable and domestic person, and I like to have people to dinner, for example, at my house, the number of times in a year I can do that is severely restricted because of my workload, and so it's a real treat for me when I can get some friends I really love around to dinner, and that's a great treat for me. But I don't do it as often as I'd like to. So that kind of intrusion, the workload intrusion on private life, and the fact that you're never off duty as an MP. You're never off duty.
There's always something happening.
It's not just that, it's wherever you are an MP. So you can't, you have to leave the country to get any sort of anonymity. And I don't get to do that very often.
Occasional holiday.
I had one. I had one last year. Beginning of this year, overseas. over Christmas, and it was fantastic. Just walking around and knowing that nobody knew who you were was fantastic. Yeah, it was great. I did happen to run into people I knew because I was in London, so you do tend to run into New Zealanders there. But it was great. It was really good.
So what is the Rainbow Room?
The Rainbow Room is a room that some of us Rainbow MPs decided would be a good thing to have in Parliament. We've got a Māori Affairs Select Committee room, and that has been around for a very long time. There's a very old Māori Affairs Select Committee room, and the one I took you to was the newer one. But that's been around for a very long time. In fact, the old one's called Native Affairs. That's how old it was. So there's a Pacific Island Select Committee room. There was a women's one, which some of my colleagues in the 80s agitated to have, and that's got photos of every woman MP that's ever been here around the walls. I don't know whether they've updated it recently. I haven't been in to have a look, so I should go and. I know what it was. It happened in the 90s because it was for the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage that came about, and I think they stopped the photos at 1993. So I don't think there's been any photos added since then. That's what I remember now. Yeah. And so some of us thought it was high time, after the homosexual law reform in the 1980s, it was time to get a rainbow room because we had a number of rainbow MPs. And so we agitated. They were all in the Labour Party at that time. I wasn't in Parliament as that movement started. Oh gosh, no, perhaps I was, because I was there for the so it must have been after 2005. So by then we had Tim Barnett, Chris Carter, we had Georgina Beyer as the first transgender MP in the world, actually. So they were all Labour. Charles Chauvel, me, Grant Robertson now, Louisa Wall. So we've got a bit of a history of gay MPs in the Labour Party, and while Tim and Georgina and Chris are no longer MPs, we've still got four of us in the House now, including Kevin Haigh as well for the Green Party, and Jan Logie just joined. So that's three lesbian MPs now. So for a long time I was the only lesbian MP in the House, and was certainly the first out one. But before that, of course, there was Marilyn Waring in the 1980s, and that was a different era, different time. And it was much more difficult for her to be out at that time. So now the National Party's also got one gay MP, Chris Finlayson, who's the Minister of Arts, Culture and Heritage and Treaty Settlements, and he's not quite as keen on advocating gay positions as the rest of us are. In fact, just voted against the first reading of the Marriage Equality Bill. But there you are.
Why is that?
You'd have to ask him. I have no idea. I can't work it out.
Are there other LGBTIQ politicians from the past that you admire?
Oh yes, I think Marilyn Waring did a very good job in lots of ways. I think while many people knew she was gay, she wasn't out publicly, and Rob Muldoon, the Prime Minister at the time, who was a tyrannical sort of a leader, used that against her and made her life quite miserable. I mean, she was in his caucus, and he made her life quite miserable in that regard. But we're long past we're long past that that stage where homosexuality is an accusation. It's not anymore, and we're much more part of the wallpaper than we ever used to be. So I think those who've gone before me, like Chris and Tim and Georgina, have all been wonderful trailblazers.
What's it like being a lesbian in Parliament?
It's kind of unnoticeable, really. It's I'm proud to be out and proud to defend gay issues and to represent them. My major portfolio is health, and I'm absolutely preoccupied with that. Where there are health issues that affect our queer communities, then I'll advocate for those. Just recently I wrote to Tony Ryle asking him about what moves had been made since they've been in government to improve access to health care, appropriate access to health care for transgender people. So I'm just waiting for the reply on that. So I'm happy to advance those issues within and outside of my portfolio. Certainly, if they come up, people would expect me to advance those issues, and I do. So apart from that, we're so normal that it's normalised that it's kind of not an issue on a day-to-day basis. It's only an issue as things come up. So I don't experience any discrimination. Any novelty value is long since worn off, and there's certainly no possibility that anybody could use it as a weapon against me, because I've disarmed them on that front.
Going to talking about health, my mum's a nurse.
Right.
Yeah,
That's really interesting, because one of the questions I asked of Tony Ryle was relating to the appropriate provision of health care and the mental health and safety of transgender prisoners. So I'll ask I'll be interested to see what he comes back with on that, because I think it's a real issue, because a lot of our transgender community end up in prison for one reason or another, and getting them put in the right prison is a hassle to start with, and then getting them appropriate care, health care, is a real issue as well, and they are seriously at risk in prison. So I do have real concerns for them. Good on them.
Is it legal to donate blood if you're a homosexual?
No, a homosexual man. No. It seems to be all right for women. But no, there is a prohibition. It's not a law, but it is a prohibition that the New Zealand Blood Service still applies to gay men. And just as recently as last year, we had, in front of the Health Select Committee, we had the New Zealand Blood Service come up for financial review. And so I asked them about this very point, and I said, okay, where are you up to with dropping the blanket discrimination now that we've got screening processes for blood, and all blood now is screened for HIV. Why do you stop gay men giving blood? And they still maintain that it's a high risk group, and the World Health Organization standards are such that this blanket discrimination applies in numbers of countries, and until such time as that is relaxed internationally, they don't feel they want to lead the way on that.
Is there any way that Parliament can actually intervene by that?
By continuing to press the point, and saying, and certainly if I were Health Minister, I would be keen to review that. I'm sure it can be done by regulation. It could certainly be done, but I would do it under advice. But it seems to me that given increasing prevalence of HIV in the heterosexual community, it is still a precautionary measure that is used that discriminates against gay men, and I think that the emergence, particularly through refugee communities and others, of HIV in the heterosexual community begins to erode the rationale for the discrimination against gay men. However, it is still true that gay men are a higher risk population.
Is that why a lot of people try not to come out as their sexuality when they donate blood? Well,
I don't think they should. They shouldn't conceal their sexuality. If they know they're not at risk, and they're absolutely certain they're not at risk, then certainly they are being discriminated against. But that issue needs to be dealt with properly and by regulation and by agreement.
So what's it like being a woman in Parliament?
Over the last, I suppose, 2 decades or 3 decades now, I think we've trained the men. And we're getting a different breed of male MP coming through, which is
more
great.
Open-minded.
Oh, well, they tend to be married to modern women, and they got to get with the program. The dinosaurs who would call you girly have mainly died off. Nobody uses that kind of language now. They used to, and you used to be put down for being a woman, but long before I came into Parliament. But it was prevalent in the 60s and 70s and 80s even. And but with a huge influx, I have to say, of Labour women in 1984, with the 4th Labour government came in, we had a huge influx of women who were all stroppy and didn't put up with any of that crap. And so the men were trained fairly quickly.
How did you cope with the anti-homosexual statements in the debate, especially with same-sex marriage?
They were nowhere near as vile or as hostile as the whole campaign for homosexual law reform in the 80s. So we've morphed, we've evolved, we've grown up, and what's left opposing us is a little radical, usually religious rump that will never be persuaded anyway. But they are so much in the minority now that really and truly they shouldn't bother anybody. It was not like that in the 80s, and people were vilified, and it took a lot of courage for people to come out. These days, it's not a matter of courage, it's simply a matter of honesty.